Diolch yn fawr, Charles. Prynhawn dda pawb. Diolch yn fawr am y gwahoddiad. Prynhawn ma. Thank you very much, Charles. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you, albeit virtually, this afternoon. I'm so pleased to be able to speak with you, although, as I said, not in person, and an opportunity to first of all say thank you for the very many members of the region that visited Brecon and Radnorshire, which Charles just alluded to, during the by-election campaign to support my colleague Jane Dodd. So a massive diolch yn fawr, a massive thank you for everybody who came to be and are. And yes, I am a very proud graduate of Manchester University. I enjoyed my time at the university immensely, probably a little bit too much, as was reflected in my grades, but I did have a fantastic, wonderful, wonderful time. And I am desperately trying to persuade my middle daughter to follow in my footsteps as she begins to think about filling out her UCAS form in the autumn. What Charles didn't say is that my 21.5-year career at the now Senedd, was the National Assembly, now called the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, is drawing to a close. In fact, I just have another 10 weeks in office, all being well, and hoping desperately that the election will not need to be postponed because of COVID. And as he said, I was elected in the first elections to that assembly back in 1999. And so perhaps this afternoon gives me an opportunity to share a few thoughts about how those 21, almost 22 years have been, and also maybe to reflect on the last 12 months, which have absolutely been an unprecedented time. So I am what they call a Senedd lifer, having been elected, as I said, in the very first elections back in 99, the year the Parliament was established. And that's an achievement of which I am immensely proud and I remain humbled by. But having looked up the dictionary definition of lifer, I'm not so sure whether that's a moniker that, that I like. It says in the dictionary that a lifer is someone who's been punished by being in prison for a very, very long time. And I know that politicians aren't held in the highest of esteems these days, but that does seem a bit harsh to me. Although thinking about it, having been cooped up in that Parliament building all day, every day, we have allocated visiting hours. We have a bell that lets us know where we're expected to be and the activities we're expected to carry out. People come and view us through glass windows. Well, and there's a culture of passing secret messages through the IT system in the chamber. So perhaps maybe a lifer is an accurate description of how things have been for the last 21 years. So I'm an original, uninterrupted by acts of God, the electorate, or the lottery of the regional list system that also forms part of the Senedd. But in all seriousness, it's been a huge source of pride for me to be the original member for Brecon and Radnor, to be the first female leader of a Welsh political party, and the first non-Labour Minister for Education over the last 22 years. And it has been a time of huge, massive change, not only in Welsh politics, but obviously in the fortunes of our own political party. So I thought maybe, if you would indulge me, I would reflect just briefly on some of the lessons that I think that I have learned over the last 5 years of being a minister in a government, in a multi-party government. And I would focus not on 3 R's of education, but on 3 C's: coalition, compromise, and clarity. So the big question for us as a smaller party is whether coalition and power sharing is really the right option. And only last week I took part in a Lib Dem podcast where we explored some of these challenges with those that had served in the coalition government in Westminster, as well as the new party president. And certainly there are still very strongly held views about whether that was the right decision. But for me, I am convinced that as a party that seeks to change things for the better, a party that looks to reform, a party that looks to really make a difference to people's lives, especially those people in society who feel left behind, then there is no other option but to strive for power. I've been fortunate in the previous Senedd term to have been able, from a position of opposition, to deliver a number of Liberal Democrat policies in budget negotiations with Labour colleagues. But I don't think anything that we achieved in that time can really surpass the opportunity that we've had over the last 5 years to truly make a difference. As the Education Minister, I am really proud that I have been able to put Welsh Liberal Democrat policies into action. This has meant a relentless focus on reducing the attainment gap. The number of free school meal learners achieving at least one science GCSE qualification has increased by 60% over the last 5 years. 100% of our schools now have superfast broadband compared to 35% of schools when I first became the minister. And as we were just reflecting at the end of that last conversation, we are radically changing what schools teach our children. We are introducing a brand new curriculum with a strong focus on the purposes of education, ensuring that children have the requisite knowledge, skills, and experiences as a result of their time in Welsh schools to ensure that they can live happy, purposeful lives, ready to be citizens of Wales and the world. We've also introduced a new finance system for supporting students, which has meant a 51% increase in postgraduate studying in Wales and a 20% increase in part-time learners. And the average Welsh student undertaking a full-time degree course will be in receipt of a £7,500 grant, not a loan, a grant to cover their living costs. And this year we have seen a record number of Welsh students from our most deprived communities going on to study at a higher level. Now, of course, some of our plans and some of the things that we'd hoped to achieve over the last 12 months have been significantly impacted by the onset of COVID. And I'm very pleased that it didn't take a Premier League footballer to remind us in Wales of our need to feed children, not just whilst they're in school, but whilst they're at home, either through the disruption or through the holidays. We were the first part of the United Kingdom to commit to funding free school meals during school holidays, and that commitment has now extended to Easter 2022. So that in this time of great uncertainty, those families have a little more certainty that their children will receive that support. And we've done that in partnership with our local authorities. So 21 of our 22 local authorities actually support families by a direct payment of cash into families' bank accounts. So some of those horrible pictures that you've seen of inadequate, wholly inadequate food boxes being delivered to families by private companies. That's not how we've done it in Wales. We've empowered families by giving them the resources that they need to be able to make choices for their children. In the last year, we have distributed in excess of 130,000 pieces of IT equipment, and we have a further 35,000 to be delivered. We were the first part of the United Kingdom to be able to offer all of our children some time for face-to-face contact back in school prior to the summer holidays. And foundation phase children will start to return to school here in Wales on Monday, with our children from 3 to 7 returning, as I said, on Monday, and with a plan for a full return to primary education, all being public health allowing us to do so, by the 15th. We were the first part of the United Kingdom to recognise the real continuing challenges to education this year, and took a decision to cancel formal examinations back in the autumn. Thus being able to work with our teaching profession and our exam regulators to have an alternative to examinations. Our children know how they're going to be assessed, whereas children in England will have to wait, I believe now, until later on this week before they will actually find out how they will be assessed this year. But of course, it's not been without its challenges, and we now must begin to think about how we address issues of learning interrupted. And I think it's really important that we don't start from a deficit model. All children as learning have been interrupted, but it has not been lost, as if it could never be recovered or achieved, re-achieved. It's been interrupted, and we now need to work really, really hard with our education family to understand what they need to be able to best support children's learning going forward. And here in Wales, we will do that on the basis of understanding that the first thing we need to do is address children's health and well-being. Because if well-being isn't addressed, then learning cannot stick. And therefore, we have taken the pressure off on some of the legal obligations with regards to curriculum, so when children are able to get back to more face-to-face teaching, teachers are able to really work and focus on well-being first before we turn to some of the academic pursuits, which of course, we will need our attention. And we are working in partnership with our education family to develop the next stage of our education recovery plan. There's more to do. It was a useful reminder by an independent think tank just last week that has reminded us that all governments need to put more resources behind this, but very pleased to see the recognition that the Welsh Government is targeting its catch-up resources and its recovery resources in a way that better than across our border. But back onto my second, so that's what you're going to do. That's what you can do if you're part of a coalition. You can really make a difference. But clearly, with that delivery also comes the next C, which is compromise. And I believe compromise is always needed in politics. Otherwise, you'll never get anything done. And to be honest, as a minister, I've had to make compromises every single day. But that does not mean that we can't be radical and pursue a liberal agenda. And I think some of the things that we've been able to achieve have been radical, but we've also had to, in some ways, focus on what unites myself and my other members of the government, which don't belong to the Liberal Democrats, and there have been some compromises along the way. But in that compromise, we have to have clarity, and that's my final C. I think as a party, we must always have clarity of purpose. And that's really, really important if you're a junior member of a coalition or a single Liberal Democrat minister in a government. We have to be absolutely clear what we are about and why we're about it. So my advice to Liberal Democrats, wherever they are, is that we need to leave the public in absolutely no doubt of what we stand for above all else. And in my view, and I would say this, wouldn't I think education is a pretty good place to start. It's always been, I believe, our number one priority, and it stems from everything that we believe in. So here in Wales, I hope that the focus over the last year on a national mission to ensure that every child, no matter who they are or where they are, has the opportunity to be the very best they can be, has been one that can really instill amongst parents and the wider population that they have an education system that they can be proud of and they can have confidence in. But we have to be clear ourselves. Now, I know that our party, and my goodness me, you're all here this afternoon, and there's nothing worse than listening to a speech via Zoom, is, we're nothing if we're not optimistic. And our belief in the common good and community, our ambition for equality of opportunity, and our passion for internationalism and fighting intolerance, well, I think that optimism has never been needed more. We've been through tough times as a party, and we've come up with the answers previously, and we need that conviction to do so again. Because I believe that there are millions of liberal-minded people who need a voice that is optimistic, effective, and credible. So, I know sometimes being a member of the Liberal Democrats can be incredibly frustrating, but now more than ever, we need to reaffirm ourselves to our values and to make sure that people are absolutely clear what we stand for freedom, for fairness, and an opportunity to help this country build back. Now, as human beings, I think it's only natural that we want to get back to normal. But we also have to acknowledge that the old normal, wasn't working for many, many, many of our citizens. And the new normal can be different and it can be better. Thank you so much, as I said, for having me along this afternoon. Really appreciate it. And I think I did agree that I'd answer a few questions if I haven't already overrun my slot on your agenda. Diolch yn fawr.